Report story. By Takoya. Summary. After consistent bullying, Izuku was convinced that his own life was forfeit. Ochako, who had just transferred to Aldera Junior High, vehemently disagreed. It was then, upon a starry night sky, that Izuku and Ochako's fates were irreversibly intertwined. Equals 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 dot. Chapter 1. She sat there, her legs dangling from the edge and her auburn hair blowing softly in the gentle wind. The setting sun faintly illuminated the sky above her, and Ochako was confident that Aldera Junior High's rooftop was one of the best views in the area for such an occasion. The celestial ball of fire barely overlooked the other buildings in view, which really accentuated the otherwise normal daily occasion. She reminisced of her old school and friends, but her parents moved as it was better for their construction business evidently. She sighed deeply. Thoughts of her friend flooded her consciousness. Memories that consisted of fun and adventure flashed before her eyes as she watched the sun inevitably set. But, alas, it was not meant to be as that event transpired, and soon after, she moved to a new school with her parents. It was here, though, that she eagerly awaited the stars to make themselves visible. It was her favorite pastime. She figured that if she hadn't decided to become a pro-hero, perhaps she would have studied to become an astronomer instead. She still resolved to find a better area in regards to light pollution, though, for the time being, this was more than okay. She would have loved this place. Ochako said aloud. Her mind drifted to her friend once again, and her face fell. Ochako and her were close, but unbeknownst to Ochako, she suffered extensive bullying, and eventually took her own life, jumping off of the school rooftop. She nearly gagged at the thought. Ever since her death, Ochako resolved that as part of her being a hero, she would put an end to bullying. At least, as much as she possibly could. Her fists clenched. No one should ever have to go through it, she reasoned. The tragedy of her friend shook her to her core when she heard the news. It was then she likened bullies to in reality be villains. A gust of wind blew, and Ochako was forced to brush her hair back. The sun was only going to be visible for a couple more moments, all of which she absorbed as she thought on and on. She fondly clutched the necklace that she wore on her neck. A purple sphere with countless bright spots representing the many stars in the universe, with a silver shooting star that swirled around until it gradually settled into the middle of the stone. A final memento of a time she'd forever cherish. As she gazed upon the setting sun, she heard a door open and slam behind her, immediately drawing her attention. She noted a green-haired boy that stood not 20 feet from her. He appeared out of breath, like he was running. Sweat, no, tears stained his face. She realized that this was one of her fellow students, though one she hadn't spoken to before. Concern took hold of her as she looked upon him more, and for some reason, she was reminded of her friend. Without realizing it, Ochako found herself standing up from her spot on the edge and slowly walking towards the frightened boy. "Are you okay?" she asked slowly, stopping her movements about 10 feet from him. The boy clutched his arms, hugging himself tightly as he turned his head away from her. He started, but never finished. Pain somehow oozed out of his voice despite him hardly uttering a word. Ochako gulped, dread filling her gut. Her instincts were screaming at her to do something, but her mind drew a blank. This boy in front of her was in a state of incredible distress, that much was obvious. She didn't want to jump to conclusions, but she had a feeling she knew exactly what he came up here this late at night to do. Promoted stories. You'll also like. Hurt 'cause I love you to death Izuocha. Ha. 8.9K 141 Class 1A is now Class 2A and is working to be better heroes due to events that had happened before. Deku has gotten strong feelings toward Uraraka during the summer as I am, sequel of, UR check mark 69.5K 1.8K. This book is the sequel of, You Are So Better. Read that first before going here. Tears of joy. Thank you to that one reader that suggested this title. I can't see you sad face, but thank you. Mirko X Shy Male Reader 174K 1.1 Key. Don't own MHA. I hope you enjoy the story I made. Her prince from the underworld half demon is 0.26.1K 462. It's basically the same story as my succubus Momo X Deku story. I know, real original, but hey, now you guys get a Deku from the other side of the tracks. Not all heroes wear capes. Some just have 8.43.1K 1.4 kilo. Everybody. This is a suicidal, depressed Deku book with Dadmic. Will their bond grow? Will Mike fuck up? Will Izuku try to kill himself? Find out yourself. Number 1 Radio. Ohm Fluke Day 112K 8.2 kilo amperes. Collection of short Ohm Fluko for 365 days. Please check the second book for the rest of the day's update. Return of Mokudant discontinued 3.5K 45. This story is officially up for adoption. If anyone is interested, message me or comment on the story. It's okay, you know. She found herself saying, I don't know what's wrong, but I'm sure that it's okay, that it'll work out, she pleaded. Ochako hoped her words reached him, but that remained to be seen. The boy shook his head again, a couple stray tears being flung to the side. I can't. It won't. I'm sorry, he finally half shouted before running to the side, to the edge of the rooftop. Ochako's eyes widened before she screamed, no. She thought of her friend for a moment, and realized she was sprinting. It wasn't a huge distance to sprint by any means. Some people could probably jump it in a single bound, but she went as fast as she possibly could. He was only a few feet away from the edge when Ochako tackled him, knocking him down onto the hard surface. Her heart was racing 1,000 miles an hour, she realized, but she had done it. He was secured. As she pinned him down, she regained her posture, sitting up as the boy underneath her wailed. Her heart ached, and she wondered what could have caused him such pain. He struggled pathetically, his strength seemingly gone entirely. Finally, the green-haired boy went limp as the girl thought of what in the heck to say. As she scrunched her face in thought and concern, he spoke. Please let me go. Ochako's heart broke once again hearing him plead like that, but she didn't release the grip she had on him. She realized that if someone else saw them right now they may get the wrong idea since she was on top of him and holding him down. She breathed, trying to collect herself. Her situation had certainly changed drastically in the past couple of minutes. Focusing on the distraught boy, she steeled herself. No. The boy had a range of emotions flash across his face, finally settling on a cross between anger and anguish, but he didn't say anything. It's okay. I don't know why you're doing this, but, she breathed again. I know someone loves you, you're worth it. Someone would be very, very sad if you were gone. I lost a friend because of this, and not a day goes by that I don't think of them. And not just me, but their family, too. Losing her destroyed me, all of us. So please. She saw that his gaze softened, but his crying remained just as intense as it was before. Whatever is wrong, I'm sure you can get through it, but if you do this, there's no take-backs. She unknowingly got louder and louder as moisture pooled in her own auburn eyes. This is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. She grabbed the collar of his shirt with both of her hands and she proceeded to yell at him, her emotions pouring out of control as her own tears fell onto his own shocked expression. If you do this, you're gone forever. She let go of his shirt and pulled away, however, she remained on top of him. She proceeded to wipe her eyes, doing her best to control her emotions and failing miserably. Seeing the stunned face of the boy under him, she closed her eyes and took a deep, calming breath before opening them again. Ochako was surprised, though she admitted that maybe she didn't know what to expect. She saw anger, and perhaps resentment. This isn't a temporary problem, he said slowly, gritting his teeth together. Confusion spread across her expression. What's the problem then? He shifted uncomfortably, and she realized that this was due to their position, but she was unwilling to relent just yet. His face scrunched up in agony yet again before he spoke. I'm quirkless. Her heart went out to him at that moment. She realized that must be incredibly difficult in today's age where nearly everyone has a quirk. She opened her mouth to respond, but was immediately silenced by the green-haired boy's continued rumination. I can't be a hero if I don't have a quirk. He shouted in obvious emotional pain. She turned his head to the side, hiding his eyes from the girl. Keiko-chan said that if I jump off. Her eyes narrowed viciously. Maybe I could get reborn in the next life with a QQ quirk, he stuttered badly, but she understood. This poor, innocent boy was being bullied. Bullied. Bullied because he didn't have a quirk. Bullied over something he had no control over. Instead, bullying drove him to try and take his own life. A deep-seated rage rose within her. In a move totally uncharacteristic of her, she screamed. Fuck them. Fuck bullies, and fuck anything they have to say. She rose up from the boy whose name she still didn't know and continued to yell angrily. They're monsters. They're villains and they get away with murder. I hate them. I hate them so much. She stood by the edge, with the boy getting up to a sitting position as he watched her in awe. She turned around, focusing her auburn eyes at his green. Please, don't let them win. She dove back at him, stopping just in front of him as he sat down, and she proceeded to beg him on her knees. I had a friend kill herself because of bullying, she said solemnly. It's okay. It's okay. She wiped her eyes dry again. I'm trying to be a hero too, you know. Maybe we can both become heroes, she said slowly, her emotions spiraling out of control. Izuku sat there with an absolutely shocked expression. She was becoming more emotional than he seemed to be. He shook his head sadly though, lips trembling. I can't be a hero without a quirk. Ochako clutched her necklace close to her chest, thinking of her friend. Then she raised her head back up and stared into his eyes, not caring if she made the boy uncomfortable with her intensity. Tears flowed and spilled over, wetting the boy's shirt. UASNS. I think you can be a hero. She said it with conviction, staring into his eyes. Almost like she really believed that. Like she really believed in him. Just some student he didn't know, believing that he can be a hero. Without a quirk, his eyes widened more than before and he felt so vulnerable at that moment. Why you do? He asked, panicked. A feeling he had forgotten rushed within him, hope. He was so hopeful that someone believed in him. It almost seemed like a light he hadn't been able to see. Even his own mother didn't believe in him. You really do? He asked again, more desperate than before. She smiled happily, despite her tears. Yeah, I think you can be a real hero someday. Her eyes stopped watering as much, her emotions seemingly being brought under control. He on the other hand was a different story. He started crying again, but out of joy. She closed the distance again and enveloped him in a warm hug, which he didn't contest. He trembled in her arms, but he definitely wasn't going anywhere. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, he kept saying as he hugged her back. She simply smiled and let him express his intense emotions. Eventually, after a couple of moments, they separated and Ochako looked up at the stars, finally visible to the naked eye. Night was upon them and she would soon have to head home, but she looked back at him, and he shyly returned the look. She took in a calming breath before continuing. My name is Ochako Uraraka. What's yours? She asked in a friendly manner, despite both of them looking like a mess. Izuku immediately became quite shy, realizing he hadn't even introduced himself yet in the chaos of what had recently transpired. I'm a Izuku Midoriya, he gulped. It's nice to meet you, he said happily, yet also nervously. She laughed, and he wondered if he had done anything wrong. It's nice to meet you too, Izuku. She looked up at the stars longingly for a moment. Hey, Izuku, she asked while bringing her gaze back to focus on him. Yeah, let's become heroes. He gasped slightly, before smiling and eagerly nodding. He took notice of Ochako's grinning as well. He thought briefly about what had just happened. Honestly, he never imagined things would play out the way they just did. But he was okay with the result, ultimately. Awesome. I guess we should figure out a time to train then, huh? She pointed out. Why yeah, you have a phone number. Oh, yeah I do, he fumbled. May I have it, silly, she smiled at his awkwardness. Izuku's face burned. The only girl that had his phone number was his mom, and now he was giving it to a girl he had just met. He reached for his phone and frowned when he saw the text message he had been about to send to his mom that was saved as a draft. A suicide note. He quickly deleted it, shaking his head. Ochako stayed silent, but he feared that she may have seen it. They exchanged numbers, with Ochako pulling her phone out. "You know, I'm actually new here," she mentioned, putting her phone away. Izuku looked at her curiously. It was true, surely. He hadn't actually seen her around before. He realized that she must have moved soon after her friend had. Izuku shook his head. "Bad thoughts. So I was just, well. Let me start over." She took a breath before briskly asking, "Hey, so what are you doing tomorrow after school?" "I have nothing planned. Wanna hang out or something?" "Sure. Awesome," she cheered. "Maybe we can go to the park and train or something." She was bubbling with exuberance and excitement, emotions that Izuku noted he hadn't been experiencing much of lately. Just as Izuku was about to respond, he felt a text go off in his pocket. Checking it, he saw that it was his mother asking where in the world he was at this hour, and gulped. Of course, there were also the previous messages and missed calls. This would be fun to deal with, he thought. "Hey, Ochako." She turned her head as she was gazing at the stars again, of which he made sure to mentally note down. "Yes, Izuku." He frowned, not wanting this moment with his new friend to come to an end. Got to go home. It's getting late," he spoke softly, the disappointment tangible in his voice. She frowned, but nodded in understanding. "Okay, I should probably get home too." They both stood up and made their way down the stairs. There was a special path to the roof that remained open even when school was closed, much to Izuku's surprise. He would have figured there'd be more people there, perhaps experimenting with drugs or other such nonsense. Nevertheless, it was typically abandoned. Well, with today's exception, he noted as he glanced toward the auburn-haired girl. He hadn't expected to make a new friend tonight, much less one that would stop him from committing suicide, but it all worked out, it seemed. Plus, they were even going to train to be heroes. How exciting! He didn't have any friends at the moment, so he was definitely rather excited to meet Ochako in that regard. Finally, on the sidewalk by the school exit, Ochako turned to Izuku and asked, "So which way are you going?" Izuku blushed and pointed left, eliciting a smile from the girl. "I'm going that way too." Izuku smiled, happy to have a little more time with his new friend. They continued on, and as they walked they asked each other about the classes they had. Sadly, they didn't share any, probably due to her joining halfway through the year. Izuku was curious about her old school, and she spoke highly of it, but mentioned how they had left due to her family's business being better in this area. They also learned they lived only a few blocks from each other. Izuku was becoming more and more comfortable. Once he opened up, he kept asking question after question, which Ochako seemed happy to answer. Having been a while since he was able to talk like he didn't want this moment to end. Eventually arriving at Ochako's house, they stopped. "This is my house, it's not the best but..." I think it's quite nice, actually, he interrupted, causing Ochako to smile awkwardly. She did mention that part of the reason for her moving here was due to her family's financial situation, but in the end, Izuku sympathized, having elaborated that it's just been him and his mom, so he understands how that can be. Though he didn't get into it, the child support his mother received usually meant they had plenty to spare. Thank you. I'll see you tomorrow, Izuku, she said, starting to walk backwards toward the house and waving before turning around entirely. Izuku's heart clenched at the prospect of departure with his friend, but he resolved that he'd see her tomorrow. "SCU, Ochako," he said, waving back. Suddenly, though, a thought crossed his mind and he chased her a little bit to her house, trying to get her attention. Wait, he half shouted. Ochako stopped and turned around, curious. Izuku realized what he was doing and blushed madly, thinking perhaps this to be a horrible idea, but he already put himself in this situation, so he may as well follow through with it. Maybe we could meet up here and walk to school tomorrow, he said impossibly quickly. There. He said it. He saw the gears turning in Ochako's head, translating what Izuku told her, taking a moment, presumably due to the speed at which it was said. He worried he may have done something wrong, but his worries were dispelled when he saw her smile and reply. "Okay. I'll be outside at 7:20. Bye," she told him before waving and running inside. Izuku stood there, waving back at her, a smile stretching wide across his face. He eventually, after a moment or several, turned around and walked home. Entering his home, his mom greeted him at the door, worry and panic evident on her face. There, Izuku realized that Ochako was right. Someone did love him, his dear old mother. He could have never imagined the grief she would have had to endure if he disappeared. He gulped at the thought and shook his head. "Hi Mom, sorry I'm late," he said slowly. His mom fell to her knees and hugged him tightly, and he could see that she had been crying, which made Izuku realize the evidence of his own emotions had mostly disappeared, besides the top part of his shirt perhaps. Izuku stayed there, surprised, but in the end, accepted it. "Where have you been? You weren't answering my calls or texts. I was so worried about you. Are you okay? Are you hurt?" She rambled, customary to her personality, as well as his own. Izuku shook his head. "No Mom, I'm sorry," he thought back to Ochako. "I was hanging out with a new friend and I accidentally had my phone turned off." A half-truth, similar to the ones he'd told her before regarding any bruises he may have or why he needed extra school uniforms. She hugged him again, more tightly, before backing up slightly. "Izuku, if anything is bothering you, please tell me." It was almost like she knew. "Oh okay," he said quietly. He didn't want to bring up the immediate past, well, at least the bad parts. All right. Well, dinner is ready if you want some," Inko said, her voice evening out. Izuku tilted his head slightly. "Okay. I wouldn't mind some food right now, I'm kind of hungry." He did indeed have an appetite, perhaps from the fact he was in a better mood, maybe. She smiled hearing that. They both went inside and shut the door behind them. Izuku went to his room briefly to change while Inko prepared the food. It wasn't katsudon, but nevertheless, the scent was quite compelling. When Izuku came to the dinner table, they got to eating. "So you made a new friend today? You meet them at school?" Inko asked, breaking the silence as they ate. Izuku stopped for a moment as he thought about his reply. "Yeah, her name is Ochako Uraraka, she's really nice." "That sounds like a pretty name. How do you guys meet exactly?" Izuku thought carefully about this one, as he got the feeling that, "She selflessly stopped me from killing myself," wasn't exactly the best thing to say to his dear old mother. We met on the rooftop of the school and we were looking at the stars and just started talking, I guess." They proceeded to talk about what he and this Ochako girl discussed, and he kept it for the most part true. He revealed they sadly didn't have any classes together, but had plans on hanging out and such. He omitted the part about hero training, though, not wanting to worry his mom. Eventually they finished their meal and Izuku headed off for bed. "Thank you for the food, Mom," he said, leaving the table. "Good night, Izuku." Inko smiled, waving at him as she grabbed the dishes. He opened the door to his bedroom, turned the lights off, and plopped on the bed. He glanced over to one of his collector's edition All Might posters. He sighed and repeated the famed mantra. Plus Ultra. He rolled over to grab his phone, and looked over various news articles, many related to heroism and such. Just as he was setting his alarms though, he got a text message from Ochako and he wasn't oblivious to the rush it gave his heart. Hitting the notification, he read the message. "It was awesome meeting you tonight, Izuku, see you tomorrow tilde." Izuku noted that following the message was a smiley face. He smiled to himself and crafted his response. He made a couple different iterations, deleting them each time because he felt they were lacking or just weren't good enough to convey the feelings he had. Eventually, he formulated what he felt was the correct order of words. "Thank you so much for tonight, it really meant a lot to me. I'll be at your place at 7:20. Good night." He hoped that was okay. As he was putting the phone down, he felt another vibration and checked his messages. "Awesome. Good night." His heart swelled. She was so nice. It really made him happy. He put the phone down at last and closed his eyes, and all he seemed to think about was her. How would their new friendship turn out? Would they stay friends? Would they really become heroes together? Only time would tell, he thought as he fell into a restful sleep. Chapter 2. Izuku stood there, feeling almost like he was on a date. Standing outside of a girl's house was foreign to him. A date? Izuku blushed. They were just friends, obviously. He sighed. She was very pretty, he thought. He shook his head. That was enough of that thought process. He could hope that maybe in the future there could be something there between them, but for now they had still only just met. You're supposed to really know someone before you date them anyways, right? And both parties are supposed to be interested in each other. Izuku simply wasn't interesting, thus the thoughts he was having were just pointless and should be dismissed. He wouldn't admit it to himself, but dismissing them hurt a little. Maybe it was because he was so lonely that he perhaps fantasized about having a relationship. Such silly thoughts, though, he was more than happy to simply have a friend that wasn't antagonistic toward him. He sighed again. Hearing a door open, he saw the auburn-haired girl walk out in her school uniform, backpack securely fastened. He could barely believe that last night wasn't some weird dream, but waking up and seeing her again he was assured that it was, indeed, reality. She waved and walked up to him before greeting him. "Good morning, Izuku. Sleep okay?" she asked politely. He nodded, nervous and unsure what to say, but feeling like he had to say something. "Why yeah, I'd say so anyways, how about you?" he replied. She stretched to the side a little bit, scrunching her face slightly. "I think I slept on my side weird, but I'm alright." "Oh, I'm sorry." he apologized. Ochako raised an eyebrow. Perhaps one of the side effects of constant bullying was apologizing for things that weren't his fault. "You have nothing to be sorry for, silly," she said playfully, nudging his shoulder with hers. "Come on, let's go or we'll be late." She started walking, looking to her side, motioning for Izuku to follow along. Sighed, motioning for Izuku to follow along. Izuku jogged for a moment to catch up, walking alongside her. They made small talk on various subjects, such as the quirks of famed heroes like All Might and Endeavor. "Who's your favorite hero?" Ochako asked, curious as to Izuku's answer. She got the impression that, despite his quirklessness, he was fascinated by quirks and the heroes behind them. She saw Izuku's eyes light up, and she thought it was the cutest thing ever. "That's easy. All Might," he replied excitedly. He began rambling on and on about everything there was to know about All Might. She was a fan herself, but it was clear who was the number one fan. And then, during that very same chase, he even stopped to apprehend two other villains before resuming his pursuit of. Ochako was impressed. Izuku had been rambling for a solid 10 minutes straight. Even so, she hung onto every word, evidenced by her interactions within the conversation. And that was how All Might ended up catching, at the time, the most wanted villain in America. That's so neat. How did that affect his ranking at the time? She asked curiously. "Oh, funny you should ask, because," and he continued, as she had faith he would. She felt that Izuku probably never got the opportunity to talk to someone like he currently was, and she was happy to give him that chance. Eventually, though, they both found themselves at the entrance of the school, and she realized she would have to interrupt Izuku, which made her a little sad. And that was the end of All Might's Silver Age as they called it. "That's so interesting, Izuku. I feel like I learned more about All Might in this conversation than school ever taught me." She laughed. "But looks like we got to go to class now. I'll see you during lunch, okay?" The brown-eyed girl smiled at him. Izuku was saddened, but it was inevitable. He would look forward to lunch though, definitely. "Okay, I'll see why." Crash. Izuku was thrown to the ground as Katsuki rammed into him from out of nowhere, laughing. "Ha! Better watch where you're going, Deku." The blonde laughed triumphantly, seeing the green-haired loser fall to the ground and scrape his hand, stopping his fall. Hopefully that bleeds a little, he thought. His entourage of co-conspirators laughed at the scene. Izuku immediately recognized the voice, and as he was on his knees he instinctively apologized, and lifted his right hand up, which he noted had a cut on it now from falling onto the stone pathway leading into the school. Sore. Shut it, Izuku. Ochako roared, much to his surprise. She had witnessed Bakugo's bullying firsthand, and she was absolutely enraged. That blonde bastard was the one who should be apologizing, she reasoned. She took a step forward and saw red as she grabbed Katsuki from behind and cocked her right fist back as he turned around. What the foo, the explosive quirk user screeched as he turned around, only to meet the brunette's fist directly to his face. It connected with a satisfying pow. Square in the nose. The blow was hard enough to make him stumble back and clutch his face, with drops of blood falling down onto the stone below. Izuku couldn't believe what he just saw. If he had to describe it, perhaps reality changing was the best way to put it. Ochako, the girl who had come to his rescue and saved his life the first time, the very next day, just stood up to his bully and, by the looks of it, just broke his nose. She totally got him, and Izuku stared on in utter amazement. The blonde took a moment to collect himself, his temper rising as he stood up. His gang stood back, shocked that their leader was taken down by a girl. "You crazy bitch. You just broke my nose," he yelled, sauntering over to her menacingly, but she stood there, unfazed. Katsuki was entirely caught off guard. Ochako stayed silent. She wanted nothing more to swing another punch at the villain, but she held herself back, thinking that this was the smartest course of action. Now that she attacked, if he were to go after her and use his quirk, of which Izuku had previously informed her of, he'd risk the ability to enroll in various hero courses, as the use of a quirk in this manner was expressly forbidden. Ochako, however, didn't use hers, and felt she had a decent excuse if she needed one. After all, she was defending Izuku from harm. Katsuki got right in Ochako's face, but she didn't flinch. Izuku watched it all play out with a surreal fascination. She was holding her ground. She'd lose, though. He had to say something. He had to warn her. "Ocha, quiet, Izuku," she yelled without breaking eye contact with Katsuki. She felt bad telling him to be quiet, but at this moment, it had to be done. Hopefully, he'd understand. Katsuki looked over to the side to see Deku sitting in shock. He looked as pathetic as ever, but looking back to this girl, he found himself mildly impressed, and that pissed him off even more. "You better stay the fuck away from me. You don't have any idea who you're fucking with." That would work, intimidation. No one had ever been able to stand up to it. He brought up his left hand, sparks flying wildly within it. Izuku sat there, on his knees, quivering as he watched, not knowing what to do. Ochako stood there, unflinching in her resolve. She faced the bully down. This was what she was meant to do, to stand up to adversity. This was Ochako's idea of heroism. For her friend's memory, and for Izuku. She puffed her chest up and did something no one would have ever imagined. She spat on Katsuki's face. Right on his supposedly broken nose. Katsuki's eyes went wide as saucers and a loud explosion ripped through the area. Though that was all it was, loud with no impact. The explosive quirk user had never been so disrespected before, and rage began flowing through him. He clenched his fist shut, and as he brought said fist up, a member of his posse walked up to him and pulled him back, with another handing him a handkerchief for his nose. "Hey man, I think we should split," the meek man said. Katsuki huffed and grabbed the handkerchief, wiping his face, and he screamed as he walked away. "Fuck you, you psychotic bitch." Ochako stood there, watching for a moment as he left with his entourage, before turning around and kneeling down next to Izuku, who was still speechless. She carefully grabbed his hand and inspected it, and she felt vile repugnancy seeing the cut on it. "You need a band-aid or something on that," she said. "And to wash it out so it doesn't get infected," she said slowly. "And I'm sorry I yelled at you. Really." She looked him in the eye apologetically. Guilt gnawed at her for that, but she had just felt that in the situation it was the best thing to do. Izuku blinked. After all of that, she was apologizing. And she was worried about him. It was too much for Izuku. He choked up, he quivered and shook violently, tears springing forth again. He hated crying, but he couldn't help it. For a child like Izuku, seeing what just happened was paramount to having a guardian angel descend from the heavens to protect him. It was like a hero coming to someone's aid in their time of need. His aid. His hero. He blinked again and looked up at Ochako's concerned brown eyes and opened his mouth, but no words came out. He found himself unable to speak. He just closed his eyes and shook his head. "Izuku. Oh Izuku," she cooed, picking his hand up and pushing his arm up around her as she hugged him. She was determined to help him through whatever it was he was going through. It's okay, Izuku. I'm here for you." Now, of course, many of the onlooking students didn't know what to think. But given that class was about to start, they simply hurried on their merry way. Ochako noticed that the grip she felt around herself seemed to gain some strength. "Izuku, it's okay. Why, you're a hero," he said quietly, softly, so softly in fact Ochako got the feeling that maybe he was murmuring like he said he does at times. "Why, you're my hero," he said, and her heart swelled. And thus, he cried profusely. Clutching Ochako with all his might. He shook so violently that if Ochako didn't know any better he was about to have a seizure. "ICC can't believe it," he struggled to say, pulling back. I'm sorry that I'm acting like this. He struggled again, and that was when Ochako decided to help lift Izuku up and walk him slightly to the side, as to get out of everyone's way and maybe make him a little more comfortable. Ochako looked him in the eyes and smiled, not exactly sure what to do for the boy. He had been put down so much that someone standing up for him seemed like a distant dream, she supposed. She knew he needed her though, and she wanted to help. "Breath, Izuku," she said calmly, looking him in the eyes as he seemingly struggled for air, his tears staining his uniform. "Please focus on breathing for me, okay?" she said again, patting his shoulder as he looked at her like she was the next coming of the Messiah. She sighed and pulled out her phone to check the time. 10 minutes until class. Not bad. She was thankful that they had left so early to go to school. She put the phone away and put both of her hands on either of Izuku's shoulders and followed the on-the-fly breathing exercise with him, trying to get him to calm down so he could get to class. He tried his best, but the tears wouldn't stop. She couldn't think of what to do, so she pulled him into another hug, but still mimicked the breathing exercises, and she could tell that he was doing his best. After a minute or two, she pulled away and could see that Izuku had finally calmed down somewhat, though his shirt was drenched and he didn't exactly look presentable. Ochako pulled her backpack off and reached inside for a stash of napkins she kept lying around, an idea her frugal mom gave her. They always somehow end up being useful. She took a couple and wiped his eyes and then his face and then eventually squashed them against the top of his shirt in an attempt to absorb some of the wetness it had accumulated. She pulled away and Izuku had finally stopped crying and looked somewhat presentable. "Izuku?" she asked him. He looked up at her. "Why, yeah. You okay?" He looked down a moment, and bit his lip. She could tell he was deep in thought. Yeah, I'm okay." She smiled. "Good. Please wash that out and put a band-aid on it when you can, okay?" she said, pointing to his hand with the cut on it. Alright," he said, clutching his cut hand with his okay one. "We need to head to class now. Do you think you can do that?" she asked him softly. At this point, Izuku realized that she was kind of babying him. He sighed, wondering if that made him a burden, but he shook his head, pushing away the negative thoughts. "Yeah, good." She stood up and offered a hand to the green-haired student. He looked up at her and he thought that even in her school uniform that she was totally a hero. He laughed internally, thinking about the pose that she was in, offering a hand to someone. He took the hand with his uninjured one and while finally up, she sighed. "We're gonna be late if we don't hurry, so let's go, okay?" she said to him, and he nodded. "I'll see you at lunch, okay?" she said to him. "Stay safe, alright?" He nodded and replied, "Okay, SCU." She waved at him and she took off to her own class, and he sighed deeply. "I can't believe all that just happened." Izuku then took off for his own class, and upon entering made sure to grab a band-aid. Luckily, with his first period class being science, there was a sink in the class that he used to wash the wound. He took his normal seat before remembering this was one of the classes that he shared with Katsuki and anxiety filled him. Katsuki walked in just as the bell rang, and they made eye contact before Izuku immediately stared down at his desk. He couldn't help but notice the cotton clogging the left part of his nose though. That probably meant his nose was just bruised and not broken. Probably for the best, Izuku reasoned. He shook his head. Perhaps if he simply ignored Katsuki, it'd work out better. And to his surprise, it did. Katsuki didn't say a word to him once during first period. The explosive quirk user did, however, watch the boy like a hawk. Izuku suddenly found himself in the cafeteria. He took his normal spot, alone in one of the corners. He pulled out the lunch his mom packed for him, a sandwich and some veggies. Not bad, he reasoned. He put it down though, wanting to wait for his friend. He remembered telling Ochako in the morning where he usually sits, so she'd hopefully show up soon. After a couple minutes, Ochako showed up with a school lunch. He noted it was pizza. "Hey, Izuku," she said as she sat down, a smile on her face. Ochako was clearly happy to see him, and a part of him wondered why. Hi. It's cool they got pizza for lunch today. She nodded. "Yeah, though, I see you brought one. Looks healthy." "I guess," he said as he took a bite. She laughed awkwardly for a moment. "Well, I tend to just get whatever the school lunch is because I get it for free," she said kind of quietly at the end, and he picked up that it must have been due to her family's financial situation. He wondered if she was maybe worse off than she let on. "Anyways, what exactly did you wanna do at the park later?" she asked him excitedly. He smiled shyly before replying with a question of his own. "Were you, serious about us training to become heroes?" Her eyes softened as she took a bite of her pizza. "Of course. That's what you wanted too, right?" "Well, yeah," he replied with uncharacteristic excitement, the idea of being a hero enthralling him. Izuku took a bite of his sandwich. I'm surprised that you are here with me, I guess," he said, his voice quivering slightly. Ochako's eyes raised a little bit. "Why's that?" Izuku sighed wistfully. "We just met yesterday and I guess a lot did happen and now we're friends and we're training together even. It just seems a little crazy to think about us all." Ochako frowned, and Izuku immediately regretted what he said, wishing he could take it all back. "Oh, was it all too fast? I'm sorry she paused, thinking for a moment. She looked at Izuku and tilted her head a little, laughing awkwardly. "I don't have any friends here, and even though how we met yesterday was crazy, we've been getting along I think." Izuku watched as she finished her slice of pizza and mentally slapped himself for coming off the way he did. "It's not too fast," he said quickly, pausing before continuing again. "I'm glad we met and." He looked down at his sandwich, avoiding eye contact. "You helped me." He sighed again. "That we're friends now. I think it's really awesome." He tried his best to sound genuine, but wondered how cheesy it must have sounded. She smiled genuinely. "I'm glad we met too. You seem like an awesome guy, and I'm sure we'll be great friends." Thank you." Ochako flipped her hair to the side before putting both of her elbows on the table and holding her face with her hands. She then tilted her head to the side dramatically. Dramatically. "You still didn't answer my question, Izuku tilde." She laughed slightly, seeing his embarrassed reaction. "What are we gonna do?" Izuku stammered for a moment before calming down. He took another bite of his sandwich before replying. "I think we should start with some basic cardio exercises. That way we can get into the swing of things." He began. I wanted to get into UA because that's the best school, and I also wanted to get into the hero course there, and to do that we'll want to get in really good shape for the entrance exam, and to do that we'll start a new training regimen, and we have until the end of the year for the test. And Izuku went on, and Ochako's eyes widened before she shook her head and interrupted him. Cough cough. Izuku. Ochako broke him out of his muttering. Though she hung onto every word to the best of her ability, she wanted to make sure she got it all correct. She saw that Izuku immediately stopped and stared at her, slightly embarrassed again. I'm sorry, I do that sometimes. I just get really excited thinking about all of it. She giggled. Let me just get this straight, Izuku. So the plan is to ultimately get into the hero course at UA specifically, then? He nodded. Okay, that's awesome, because that was actually the school I was thinking about trying to get into. I just heard though that it's quite exclusive and difficult to get into. Well, yeah, because it's the best. It was the school All Might himself attended. She openly laughed that time. Of course you'd know that. Izuku tilted his head to the side in confusion. Huh. Ochako threw her hands in the air and blinked several times. Quote dot. Another All Might fact. Obviously, she laughed again, seeing his embarrassed face. She supposed that it was something that she was going to be seeing a lot of if she was going to be hanging out with him in any notable capacity. Not that she minded, of course, it was really cute, after all. Anyways though, we're gonna train really hard then so we can pass this test. He nodded again. So tell me, Izuku, what training will we be doing then? She sat back in her chair and raised her arms and crossed them on her chest. Izuku's eyes lit up, much to her amusement. She really liked seeing him happy like that, she mused as he began. Cardio. Endurance training, stamina. It will provide a good basis for our overall plan on becoming fit. So to do that, we'll start off by running a couple laps around the park. Ochako giggled again as Izuku explained it. He certainly went into elaborate detail to essentially just say they're going to start their training by doing some running. She figured out quickly though that Izuku was incredibly analytical. If they were a hero duo, he'd certainly be the strategist, she reasoned. Sounds like a plan, Izuku. We can bring our gym clothes with us after school then. Seeing him nod in agreement, she was content they had a plan then. So, our first step towards becoming heroes then. She straightened in her chair and extended her right arm, making a fist as she motioned for him to presumably first bump with her. He froze for a moment, before shyly picking his arm up and tapping his fist against hers. To being heroes, Ochako sighed happily, seeing the boy in front of her in such a good mood. Slowly though, her expression shifted slightly. She recalled what had happened just before school and her mood soured a little bit. She glanced toward Izuku as he took the last bite of his sandwich with a giant grin on his face, and she smiled again. Her eyes eventually made their way to his other fist though, the one that had a bandage. The brunette was glad he had followed her instructions and had put a bandage on his wound. The thought of him being hurt deeply disturbed her for some reason. She realized that perhaps she felt compelled to protect him. She frowned slightly. Izuku. He glanced over to her as he put away his finished lunch. Yeah, Did you run into that Katsuki guy since this morning? Izuku frowned and looked down for a moment. Yeah, I had a class with him. Ochako's eyebrows lifted, silencing asking for more information. He stayed silent though. It was really weird, normally He stopped and looked away for a moment. Ochako understood. She thought it quite annoying that Izuku and that Katsuki kid shared a class. One in which no doubt he was bullied. The thought made her want to gag. At least he didn't try anything. If he dared touch Izuku again she'd lose it, she thought. I'm glad that asshole shut up then. She scoffed, her disdain evident in her voice. It'd better stay that way too, or so help me God. At that moment she fantasized of beating that blonde bully into the ground, bloody and bruised. I hate people like him. Suddenly the bell rang loudly and students began heading to their respective classes. Izuku frowned, which Ochako noticed. I'll be waiting outside for you after school, okay? She said to him. Ochako stood up and grabbed her tray and turned to walk off, but she stopped and turned around for a moment. Stay safe, Izuku, she said quietly, though he got the message. Okay. Quote. Promise. Izuku was taken aback from the question but he quickly nodded and replied. Why yes, I'll see you after school. Ochako smiled and turned around, disappearing into the crowd.
now I turned it off. No, I'm talking about the dryer. I turned it off for you because the washing machine's not done yet.
I don't think you needed the chocolate one. Like the skull, yes, but I don't think you needed those. And you put Zacky's stuff away? I mean,
yes.
Great. Where'd you put it?
I put it on his bed.
Interesting. What about a sheet?
It's on his bed.
Why? The lemon curd I really like. I think the texture's great. Didn't I say wash your hands before you?
I did.
And then you just touched yourself. And I also don't. So now you need to wash your hands again.
Mom, I didn't get nothing on my hands.
Now! So, do I disagree with Zach? Or do I disagree with Stephanie? That is the question.
There's nothing on my hands.
I don't care. I didn't mind the color.
Sure you can.
The star here for me is the lemon meringue. Thank you so much. I just thought the cake was bad.
crowd. Izuku did the same as he stood and began navigating the crowded halls to his next class. Luckily for him, the rest of the school day passed by quite uneventful. He had another class with Katsuki, but he remained silent. For how long that'd be the case though, Izuku was very curious. Perhaps it was a situation in which he'd just have to wait and see. Izuku eventually took out one of his notebooks. When he'd write about quirks and having finished the assignments of his class, he now began working on an entry in his notebook. One for a certain girl he became well acquainted with in quite a hurry. He still needed to ask her about her quirk. All he knew was that she had one, but he never asked and she never brought it up. Regardless, he made some sketches in preparation. Better to be productive, he reasoned. He also resolved to ask her about her quirk when they went to that park. After his classes, he found himself walking outside. Ochako didn't mention exactly where to meet up, but he assumed that just outside the entrance where she gave him that pep talk. He shivered. The quirkless boy still couldn't believe that that happened. He blushed as he also remembered what he said. How embarrassing, he thought. Though his heart swelled in happiness as he dwelled on the thought. She was incredibly patient and kind with him, something he never experienced from a friend his age. He thought about how his other friend, if Izuku could call him that after everything that's happened, Kachan, and he frowned. He used to not be so mean, but now he was definitely glad he was going to hang out with someone else. He leaned against the very same wall he was sitting beside earlier that day, and a couple moments later someone poked a finger at his shoulder, surprising him. Nye. He chirped, startled. He saw the pretty eyes of his new friend light up as she giggled, and he blushed, looking away. You're so cute, Izuku, that was a funny noise. She laughed. He frowned indignantly, still looking away. A light bulb clicked in his head though and he turned to face her and stuck out his tongue. Nai. Ochako eyes widened to the size of saucers as she stayed silent for a moment before she began howling in laughter, having to hunch over as it seemed to be too much for the poor girl to handle. I love it, she wheezed out before continuing her laughter. Izuku smiled, his stomach fluttering as he watched her laugh. Normally when people laughed at him, it felt a lot worse, but this. He liked making her laugh. He liked it. After a moment Ochako stopped her boisterous laughter and straightened her face out before pointing over yonder. Hey, were you ready to go? Yeah, I got my gym clothes in my backpack and I figured we could change in the bathrooms there. I got my clothes too, that'll work. Let's go. And thus they began their walk over to the park. Izuku figured it'd take them probably around 20 minutes. It was a really nice area, with everything being so close together. They walked in a comfortable silence, with Ochako humming occasionally. It had gotten a little awkwardly silent though in Izuku's opinion and he was worried that perhaps something was wrong, so he gulped before he asked her something that was nagging him. Ochako. She turned her face to his and tilted her head in acknowledgement. He swallowed, becoming lost in her eyes for a moment before focusing. I was wondering, what's your quirk? He was super curious after all, and was surprised she never brought it up. Oh. Did you wanna see? She asked him back. Ochako looked as Izuku's eyes lit up, and she giggled again before picking up a palm-sized rock along the path they were walking on. She looked back to her companion and noted he was suddenly holding a notebook and pencil, with the title of the book being, On Quirks and Their Users, Volume 6. Her eyebrows raised comically seeing him already jotting down notes. She smiled, one of his own little quirks, she reasoned. So my quirk, she raised her arm up with the rock, and much to Izuku's amazement the rock began to float out of her hand, is called zero gravity. That's so cool. Izuku stared at the rock as it floated away in utter fascination for several moments before sputtering, how exactly does it work? She grinned deviously as she lunged at Izuku, who was totally unprepared. Like this obviously. Before he could react, she had all of the fingertips of her right hand on his arm. Izuku yelped once he realized what was happening and the fact that he was now floating several feet in the air. His gravity was eliminated. He looked at Ochako in shock, the prankster. He figured it beat getting his notebook blown up, but still. This was crazy. I'm floating. You made me float. Wah. Anything that I touch with my fingertips, unless it's super heavy, I can make float. She gawked when she saw that while in the air, Izuku was still taking notes as he looked on, shaking her head. She continued, and if I press my fingertips together like so. She paused as she placed her hands together, aligning her fingertips perfectly, almost like she was praying. I can deactivate it. Izuku then fell, landing on his feet but almost falling over as he regained his composure. That's awesome. Izuku then bombarded her with question after question, like what the possible weaknesses were, known limitations, and other facts. A couple key facts he found interesting was that she can use it on herself but can become nauseous. The quirk works specifically by eliminating a target's gravitational pull, and that she has to be mindful to not accidentally activate it. Ochako marveled at how quick he was taking such detailed notes, and eventually her curiosity got the best of her as he seemed to be finishing up. Hey Izuku, do you normally take so many notes on quirks? Izuku blushed and shyly nodded. Yeah, it's just. They really interest me and I figure it can all be useful someday if when I become a hero. Ochako's gaze softened at that little quip. He'd definitely be a hero someday, there was no way he couldn't be, with the heart and mind he possessed, she reasoned. She glanced at the notebook with obvious curiosity. Would you mind if I read it? Izuku was taken aback by surprise and nodded, handing the notebook to his classmate. They started walking to the park as Ochako flipped through page after page, with details on various heroes and their quirks, all written with incredible detail. Izuku, this is amazing. This could be like an encyclopedia if you had more heroes. You really did all this. She lifted her head from the pages and looked at him as he nodded once more, his cheeks stained red at the praise. Thank you. I actually have several of those. That one's just the 6th one I've been working on. He had 6 of them. She supposed it made sense as it said volume 6 on it, but still, that's a lot of effort. Do you have them on you? She asked. Izuku blushed but shook his head no, I keep my others at home after. His expression faltered, to which Ochako immediately picked up on but remained silent. After Kachan destroyed the fifth one I had. Izuku watched as the brunette clearly dwelled on what he had just said and he felt a little bad. Izuku himself had gotten over it, and was dedicating his seventh volume to recreating the fifth. It'd work out fine and wasn't a big deal, he reasoned, though judging by Ochako's narrowing expression, she clearly thought it was. What? She almost shouted. Izuku bit his lip, not sure what to say, so he hung his head down in shame. That asshole. Why do you accept that? She stopped walking and instead walked right in front of Izuku as she put the notebook in her pocket. Why do you call him Kachan? Why do you seem to think you're friends with him after everything he's done? She was livid and demanding answers, all of which Izuku wasn't quite sure what to say. He mumbled incoherently, stuttering badly. Ochako's angry expression faded into one of sadness as reasoned the truth from his reaction. Izuku was the victim and didn't know how not to be. She took a step back so that she wasn't in his face, silently cursing herself for her emotional outburst. I'm sorry, Izuku, I just... He looked at her while biting his lip nervously. He's not your friend and you shouldn't talk to him, she stated seriously. Izuku frowned, recalling the years and years he'd known him. They used to be great friends, though Izuku realized that when he thought that, the word used was how he described it. Regardless, Katsuki wanted to be a hero too, right? But Ochako glared. He told you to jump off a roof, Izuku. No friend would ever say that. Izuku frowned. He refused to think of that, but she had a point he couldn't ignore. He breathed deeply. Oh, okay, he said while looking down. Ochako smiled, seeing her point had gotten across. She pulled the notebook out of her pocket and handed it to him. These are awesome and you should be proud of how good they are. She watched as his expression turned to one of surprise. He slowly took it from her and put it in his backpack. Thank you, Ochako. She asked as she turned toward the path once again. Thank you for saying all that. Ochako smiled happily. You're welcome. They continued on their path, making various small talk as they went along. Eventually, they reached the park, with plenty of sunlight still left. They changed in the bathrooms and put their backpacks on a bench. Izuku was out first and stretching. Admittedly, he was a little nervous. He hadn't, to his shame, been committing to an exercise regimen. He didn't like making excuses, but he felt pretty depressed. Well, given the incident on the rooftop. Incredibly depressed. He had to take this seriously though, so he could become a hero. He was very glad to be where he was right now. It'd be hard, but it'd be worth it, and his new friend was constantly inspiring him. He sighed, hoping that they could be friends for a very long time. Eventually Ochako stepped out and sat next to Izuku on the bench. Ready to go? She asked happily. Yeah, I was figuring we can start with 6 laps, which is about 2 miles. The park was designed in such a way there was a trail that circled it, and Izuku had done the math prior to arriving and figured that'd be the perfect way to start out. Oh, alright, let's do it, I'll try my best to keep up. She cartoonishly pumped her arms in, and he was reminded that she obviously had a lot of drive to become a hero as well. He pulled out his phone to text his mom that he was going to be late again before starting their run. The boy with green hair stood up and stretched one last time as his companion joined him. He noticed that she pulled her phone out as well, bringing out some earbuds. He thought that he should probably get some as well. She only put one in one ear though, he noted. Perhaps if they had to talk or something. Let's go, he said. They began their run. It became quickly evident how out of shape he was, and it was a little demoralizing. He was barely able to keep up after the first mile. With every step, the sharp burning in his legs got more intense, as did his need to draw in more oxygen. He was panting loudly. He persevered as much as he could, but Ochako grew concerned. She was definitely sweating as well, but it was obvious he was struggling to keep up with her. She didn't say anything though, and merely slowed her pace down slightly. Izuku noticed this though, and Ochako for the first time saw a spark of anger flash in Izuku's eyes. No, we're almost there. I can do this. Despite his wheezing and the pain he was in, he broke out into a sprint, immediately catching up with Ochako and challenging her to now keep up with him. He heard her giggle, but pushed the thoughts away, staying focused on the finish line ahead. He had probably a fifth of a mile left. Ochako heard him begin muttering to herself in her unoccupied ear. She glanced at him as she took in her breaths, and she observed for a moment. I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. Izuku repeated his mantra, his body about to give out on him, but he was pushing himself because that's what had to be done. He had a year to get ready, which was enough time luckily, but he had to work hard for it. Ochako grinned seeing that, and continued on, nodding to the sound of her music as she went. They ran side by side, with Ochako finally beginning to grow intensely fatigued at their pace. The final stretch presented itself and Izuku broke into an even quicker dash, and he had made it, immediately falling into the bench they had placed their backpacks earlier. Ochako followed immediately behind him and was a little worried by what she saw. Izuku was there, heaving. He clearly pushed himself to his current limit, but the willpower that took impressed her. He had worked so hard he nearly was about to puke. She put her music away and sat next to him, collecting herself as well as she wasn't exactly at a resting heart rate. The 2 miles weren't much on their own, obviously, but they actually ran it at quite a pace. There was room to improve too, but it was good for their first day. That was really good, Izuku, she congratulated him as he finally slowed his breathing down a little. You really pushed through at the end there. Izuku smiled, turning to her as she praised him. It wasn't much. I still have a lot more to go. You still did good, and I'm proud of you. Izuku gulped, blushing madly. Why you did awesome too. You could have probably passed me way earlier. She brushed it off. Nah. They sat there for a moment in comfortable silence as the sun was finally beginning to set. Izuku realized how comfortable her presence made him, and he wondered briefly if she felt the same way. She seemed to be, but he still wondered anyways. He took in another deep breath. He still felt the burn in his legs, but his heart was returning to normal luckily. A thought came over him as they both sat and watched the sunset. It was very pretty, he thought, seeing all the trees touched by the yellow glow. The park just so happened to be next to the beach, and perhaps that was another trail they could take at some point. A thought overcame him though as they both silently watched the nature around them. "Hey, Ochako." She tilted her head towards him, acknowledging him. He swallowed a lump in his throat. He wanted to know, as his analytical mind kept nagging at him and he didn't have an answer himself for it only she could answer, he realized. "Why did you want to be my friend?" He said it and put himself out there. Izuku felt quite vulnerable. His hair danced with the slight gusts of wind, though not as much as Ochako's when her hair obscured her face momentarily before she brushed it out of the way. He didn't realize how incredibly nervous he had become of what she'd say. She giggled for a moment, only adding to his anxiety. Was she going to say that she was just pretending to be his friend? Negative thoughts started to flood his mind as he frowned, though Ochako saw what was happening and decided to intervene. "I think we both needed a friend," she said as she kicked her legs slightly. Izuku tilted his head, not quite understanding. Luckily for him, Ochako elaborated. "Like, oh I don't know," she paused, thinking of the correct words. "Has anyone ever said you wear your emotions on your sleeve, Izuku?" His eyes widened slightly, but he shook his head no. Was that what he did? In his constant conquest of analyzing what was around him, had he neglected to look at himself? "What I mean is just, I have a hard time opening up to people usually," she said quietly. Green eyes lit up in understanding. "Oh, that's how this fits together." Izuku shifted his posture to more of a focused position as she sighed. "I told you my friend killed herself because of bullying, right?" she said, a stray tear falling down her right eye as she looked at the green-haired boy. Izuku's heart constricted, but he nodded. He recalled her telling him that during their first encounter. "I'm sorry," he apologized as he nodded. She shook her head, brushing her hair again. Ochako briefly contemplated what she was doing, letting her heart open like this. She looked into his kind and considerate eyes again and she smiled though. "I was just thinking a lot and. Do you believe in fate, Izuku?" Fate. Izuku's mind wandered to that of his quirklessness. That was fate. Izuku frowned considerably. He hadn't thought much of it, but now that he found he had a strong dislike of the word. He wasn't sure how to respond. Perhaps it was best to allow her to continue talking and see where she was going with this. "I'm not sure." Ochako winced slightly, and Izuku wondered if he had said the wrong thing. Oh, she stuttered. The first time he's heard her do that. He immediately realized that yes, he did in fact say the wrong thing. But please continue," he urged. "I'd like to hear what you have to say." He briefly remembered hearing that women like to be able to talk about their problems, and his logical side reasoned that that would probably be good. "If you're sure," she breathed. After what happened, and then running into you like I did. It's hard for me to think it's coincidental. If that makes sense. I just feel like maybe I was meant to meet you, Izuku," she finished while clutching her hand to her heart. Izuku's mouth opened, but Ochako continued before he could speak. I really like the stars. I'm lonely. I'm explaining this poorly, I'm sorry. She put her hands on her flushed face, obviously embarrassed. He scooted closer to her and took a risk. He put his hand on her shoulder, causing her to look up and into his eyes. It's okay, take your time. I don't mind. He flashed his grin at her, and she blushed and looked away for a moment, but nodded. Izuku then stayed silent, but mentally congratulated himself for being able to say that. He realized their positions kind of swapped and now he was the one helping her, and he was totally happy to do that. Okay. She stood up slightly and Izuku pulled away, as to allow her to speak comfortably. I think we both really needed a friend, and you and me. We met at the perfect time and place. Plus, we get along really well. She shyly looked away. If that's fate, then I'm okay with fate. I'm really happy we met, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't see your point about it being a perfect situation for us to meet. You're an amazing friend. Thanks again by the way. He replied. He genuinely was happy they met. He still didn't like that he was quirkless obviously, but if this is what she believed in that led to their meeting, that was perfectly okay. She stayed facing away as she absorbed what he said, but he could tell her grin was stretching from both sides of her face. Would you like to stargaze with me sometime? She asked him suddenly. Her heart was thumping in her chest. Izuku smiled brightly and nodded before replying, sure. I'd love to do that with you. I just don't know that much about it, so you might have to help me out, he answered, putting his hand behind his head nervously. Ochako's expression lit up and she faced him. You would. She pulled him into a hug. Thank you, it will be so much fun. Izuku hadn't thought this before, presumably because he was always so intensely emotional before, but not that he had a clear head. He became hyper-aware of the fact that her chest was squished against him. He tried his best to push the thought away, thinking himself a giant pervert. Eventually she pulled away, much to his relief. Are you busy Saturday? She asked him. We can do it then. Where do you want to meet up? I needed to do some stuff with my family earlier in the day, but did you want to meet at the beach over there? She pointed to an exit of the park that led to the beach, at say, 9. Sure, that'd be awesome. She smiled, giddy. We'll get to see so many constellations. It'll be great. Thank you, Izuku. I'm sorry if it's boring to you, but I really appreciate it. He waved her concern off. I'm excited too. I just don't know anything about it, so I guess you have a lot to teach me. They then sat there again for a couple moments, both turning to the sunset. Wanna walk to school again tomorrow? Sure. They both giggled. Eventually, Izuku got a text from his mom asking where he was. Izuku and Ochako decided that they should both head home, so they changed back into their normal clothes in the bathroom and departed the park. They made small and pleasant conversation, and as they approached Ochako's house, they said their goodbyes. I'll see you tomorrow, Izuku. Okay, bye. They waved and Ochako walked into her house. She sighed as she took off her shoes and backpack. She decided that this had been a wonderful day. She stood up to Izuku's bully, got some exercise, and set a date to go stargazing with the boy. Date. Well, not a date. The date is set but it's not a date, she clarified to herself. She observed that her parents were gone, presumably out still working. She went to the kitchen to make herself some food, and when she was done she went to her room and pulled out her phone to look at memes. She'd save a couple here and there, but her attention was constantly distracted. She closed her eyes and imagined his cute face and freckles. She knew he was just a friend, but she was still fascinated by him and kept fighting to not say he was attractive, which she eventually decided that he was, and there was no way around it. He was so emotional too. She always had an animosity toward people who were so stoic. It reminded her of bullies. But someone like Izuku was the opposite of that, which she liked. Of course, he can have his moments, like when he was running that last part of their exercise. She wondered what would become of their friendship. She turned off her light and pulled up her phone one last time to send Izuku a couple of memes she saved. One was of All Might saying his famous line, "I am here," but underneath was a microwave that just tinged. Another was of the hero Endeavor being compared to All Might, but the joke was that there was no comparison because All Might is too cool. She ended up falling asleep with her phone in her hand, not waking to the vibration of the response she eventually got. Where stories live. Discover now.